What's up, everybody? This is Cube. Today, thought we'd do a little deck profile on my future Gohan stage lock deck. Seems to be pretty good. It's ran against quite a few decks and has not had much trouble with most of them. There are a couple of matchups that it does have a little trouble with, but any kind of beats deck or things like that, it's gonna stand up pretty well too. We'll go through first here just sort of the Mastery and MP package here. The whole point of this deck is just to camp level 1. You only have 1,000,000 for your power level, which isn't extremely high. You're not ever going to go any higher than, D in the attack table. That being said, though, the whole purpose of the deck is to keep your opponent at 0, so your attack should still do a decent amount of damage. The cool thing about Gohan, he's just got a built-in defense shield, so every round you at least get to stop one of the physicals they're going to throw at you. And then the rest of them, depending on how the rest of your turn goes, shouldn't do much damage to you anyway. If you declare to Saiyan Tukiwaza, you can have up to 2 copies of any Saiyan-style drill and play at once. For those of you who are coming in from Panini and are not extremely familiar with Tukiwaza yet, that's essentially, back in the score days, you didn't have to have a mastery, but in the past, if you wanted to, you had to have a mastery and then play all one style like you do with Panini, but that was considered declaring a Tukiwaza. So, and have 2 copies of any of your Saiyan drills in play, which is huge. There's a lot of those drills that like all of your opponent's attacks cost plus 2 stages to perform and stuff like that, so it can really be hard for them to throw attacks. You do have a level, 2 and 3. If the first card you draw during your turn is your mastery is Saiyan, so that your opponent draw another card. That works really well with the mastery. Depending on what mastery you're using, you could end up drawing, 3 cards extra. You can be, running at least 6-7 card hands every turn, which would be pretty crazy. That isn't what this deck does, but if you do get pushed to level 2, it's not a bad thing. Level 3 is probably your least effective level. Your attacks doing extra stages of damage is cool, and drawing a card when entering combat, that's cool. I mean, you still get to draw cards, but it doesn't really do you much. So if you, for some reason, were to get shoved here, most of your MP portion of your strategy is kind of out the window, but it still isn't awful. Successful attacks can't be prevented. That's cool, at least. Here is the sort of bread and butter of this deck. One of my favorite masteries in the game. Draw a card when entering combat. If that's a Saiyan style card, show it to your opponent and they lose 4 stages. So every turn, your turn, their turn, regardless, you're 99% sure to draw a Saiyan card and drop them 4 stages regardless. That's huge with this deck and is the crux of what this deck does. I run Supreme Kai Sensei in this deck. Once per game during your non-combat, shuffle up to 5 cards in your discard pile back into your deck. Styled cards. That's nice because you can go get some of your bigger stage reduction cards back, some of your more control-y kind of type cards. A big one that's always great to have around, say an Inspection, to attach to your opponent's MP. They can't use their main personality power until they play a Dragon Ball. If for some reason they were to banish this card or something like that, or to remove it, then you could go use this to go get it back. Some of your bigger attacks are nice to get back. Some of your drills, if you were to get pushed through a level, getting your drills back would be nice. Aggression drill is huge. Hanging out drill is another critical one. But once you start getting into it from there, then most of your stuff is just going to control stages. It's gonna deal with how they push attacks through, or prevent them from it anyway. All your opponents lose 3 stages. Just keep rejuvenating through that. Can't use their mastery, can't use their MP powers, can't gain stages until the end of your next turn. This card is huge. Saiyan Jeering Drill, this one's big too. Your opponent's attacks cost an additional stage to perform. They have a Namekian Tukiwaza, it does +2, so I guess added bonus in that regard. Gohan's kick is way better than the art of the card that Panini used this for, and is a huge staple in score. Back in the score days, you could use anyone's name cards in your deck, and this was a auto include in pretty much every deck you would run ever. Incredible card. Saiyan Brace is great. It does raise your anger, which you don't necessarily want to do, but it lets you go get Saiyan Truce card, which is phenomenal. Right there. It just ends the combat, and you don't have to get rid of the cards in your hand, so you gotta hold those. You know, if you've got 3 cards or something left in your hand, then you draw your 3 next turn, you draw your 3 for the turn, and I mean, you could end up with a 9 or 10 card hand going into combat, depending on what level, which mastery you were using. This card is incredible, comboed with Brace in any Saiyan deck, especially if you're doing something like Broly or something like that. It is huge. This card is something you want to get out as quick as you can. All attacks cost +2 stages to perform. Yes, that affects you as well, but realistically, your goal isn't necessarily to throw that many attacks. It's you're running more control than anything. Running the attacks and stuff is nice, but really it's sort of screwing your opponent out of combat. They've got 3 or 4 cards in their hand that they can't use because they don't have any stages. If they do use it, it's going to be a 0 damage attack. It's things like that that just really that are a little more important than attacking. Saiyan Emergence, this one's cool too. Rejuvenate a card. Your opponent loses 4 stages. If they get to 0, then you rejuvenate this card too. This one's awesome. Rapid Slam is cool. Put it on the bottom of your deck instead of being discarded or removed. That one's awesome. Cool foil pattern on this one too. Back in the Kid Buu saga, they had some cool art, cool styles. This one's cool for when you are throwing attacks. All your attacks do an extra 2 stages of damage, or 2 stages of power draining damage, if you want to read dumb Saiyan Saga text. Confrontation, get cards out of their hand. Wall Breaker here in this deck is actually place holding Heroic Energy Sphere for more control. If you are playing against a deck that's going to run some anger and not a ton of Dragon Balls, you might consider throwing in Awful Abrasions. It essentially attaches to your opponent's MP. They can't gain any anger until they play a Dragon Ball. That card is ludicrously good and should go in at least every sideboard that's running Fusion format. Anyone has a reason to play that. There's also Severe Bruises, which does, they can't gain anger until they play Drill or something like that. I don't quite remember what that one does, but it's not nearly as good. But it does kind of have a place as well. If you were really trying to put it in the deck, it wouldn't be crazy to include. But yeah, with this deck, like I said, you're never going to push anything higher than D. Even if you do get pushed all the way to level 3, you're only at 2.5 mil. So you're never going to be pumping out a ton of damage with all of your attacks. That being said, though, it should still be, if the deck is doing what it's supposed to, which it's pretty consistent at doing, you should be able to get through that, dropping all of your attacks on your opponent with 0 stages most of the game anyway. So I wouldn't be too concerned. There isn't a ton of endurance in the deck. Saiyan Style doesn't have a ton of endurance to begin with. And again, your goal isn't to take very many attacks, and when you do take attacks, they're not really going to do much damage. Stuff like Saiyan Stop will help you get the stages back to keep you at a high level. You do have some decent blocks in the deck. There are a lot of cool abilities on some of these blocks. Bottom card of your opponent's, or if of your discard pile is styled, then they lose 4 stages again. That's another big one. This one's good too. When you stop a physical here, and then their cards that stop you from using any of your effects don't actually affect you anymore that turn, which is huge because there are a lot of scorecards and things like that, like I've been showing you here, that say, you can't use your mastery, you can't use your MP power, things like that. That card would say cards, you know, if you blocked an attack with this card and they had played some cards like that, they would no longer have any effect that turn. Lurch is good. Go search your deck for a drill, put it in a play. If your opponent's PR is 0 till the end of his next turn. Oh, it can't be, or if your opponent, sorry, read that one wrong. If this is a successful attack, your opponent's PR is set to 0, and then that can't be changed by any other effects, so they don't get to gain any stages next turn off of their base power-up anyway, which is another huge one. You know, a lot of things, all your opponent's personalities lose 4 stages. This one is especially huge if you're playing against allies or things like that, because this is going to affect all of those. It's overall, though, the deck has a lot of cohesion, a lot of consistency, and deals well with most decks. That being said, you do have some tough matchups. If you're playing against allies or something like that, it's not quite as good because they can shuffle off to the allies. If you're playing against a Dragon Ball deck, most of the purpose of your deck isn't going to do much anyway, because in a Dragon Ball deck, the whole goal is just to get to the Dragon Balls. It doesn't matter what their power level's at. And a lot of those Dragon Balls will power them up to full anyway. So you'll run into a little bit of a hiccup with that. Mostly, though, this is I would say, a fairly competitive deck and will match up well against most of the people you're playing. If anyone has any questions, let me know, and I can help you out. As far as I've seen online, everything appears to be legal with the deck. Every card, every limit 1 card is limited 1, things like that. So it should be tournament ready to go. I'll include a deck list as well, so everyone can see exactly what's in the deck. I know it's not quite put together there, mostly because I've been playtesting with it here. But if anyone wants to see some more, let me know.